Hey, I'm Andrew, and welcome to the Leading with Andrew show. I'm really glad that you're here. I've had the opportunity of working with hundreds of leaders across several industries, and I've also recently been diagnosed with ADHD. So whether you are a leader, whether you are someone who is or thinks they are neurodivergent, or you work with somebody who is neurodivergent, I've got you covered. Please note that anything that is discussed or any opinions that are shared on the Leading with Andrew show podcast are not a reflection of my full-time role in working as a senior consultant for the company Biz Group. Welcome to the Leading with Andrew show with me, Andrew, your host. It has been a minute since I have released an episode. We last recorded an episode for the Leading with Andrew show about 7 months ago. And for those of you who are tuning in again, what you'll notice is the background and the surroundings or environment is very different because I wanted to take quite a different approach in how I release episodes moving forward, because a lot has happened in the last 7 months since I released an episode for the Leading with Andrew show. So this is season 2. I am super excited to be back for season 2. I am working with the phenomenal Jay Roos, who's my producer. He will be making an appearance on the podcast from time to time, which I'm really excited about. But I've got a new vision, and one of the most important things that has happened for me in the past couple of months is that I have been diagnosed with ADHD. And I decided one of the reasons why I made my previous podcast was I've been a leader in multiple roles throughout my career, and I thought leadership is definitely something that people want to really get better at. Leadership is definitely something that people want to learn more about and understand really their style of leadership. And I interviewed some incredible guests on my show who will also be returning for season 2. But in this season, I've realized since my ADHD diagnosis that I have struggled with certain things in my career as a leader. And one of the reasons that I wanted to focus on ADHD in leadership or neurodivergence in leadership is the fact that I want people to know that some of the struggles are difficult, but that you can definitely make it through. So I thought for the first episode, or the first 2 episodes, actually, of the podcast for season 2, I am going to do a little bit of a reintroduction about who I am and what my career has been over the past, I would say, 20 or so years, 20 plus years. So what gives me the authority to be talking about leadership, and then a little bit of what my mission is moving forward, and then questions that people ask me all of the time, and some myths that I've learned along the way. But for this particular season, you are going to get a host of different guests, right? I have guests that have a PhD in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have guests who are clinical psychologists. I have guests who are motivational speakers. And from time to time, I might be interviewed on my own podcast. But the most important thing is that I'm inviting you into my home, into my living room, which is where we are currently. So let's get going. So, talking about a little bit of an introduction and a little bit about my career, which is something I didn't do in the first season. I started my career in aviation. I knew from a really, really young age that I wanted to be in aviation. I was obsessed with commercial aircraft. I still am to this day. I can sit in an airport and I can watch aircraft taking off, landing, and I can get totally lost in that. And I started my career as cabin crew when I was 18 years old. I got special permission to study while I was still in high school to finish my diploma in food and beverage management with City and Guilds, so that I knew once I finished with high school, I could go straight into flying. And that's exactly what I did. So I started my career with South African Express Airways at the tender age of 18. And I flew for them for almost 2 years. I worked with some veterans of the sky that taught me everything I knew when it came to being the best flight attendant I could possibly be. And then at around age 20, I knew that I wanted something a little different. Well, actually towards the end of 19. I wanted something a little bit different that would broaden my horizons. So I started looking online, and obviously Emirates was one of the first airlines that popped up. And I thought, oh, yeah, absolutely, definitely want to be working for Emirates. And I looked at the application age, and unfortunately it was 21, and I was 19, turning 20 at the time. So I kept on looking, and I stumbled upon this airline that I really didn't know much about, and that is Etihad. And at the time, in 2008, they were still leasing some of the aircraft. The product wasn't really consistent throughout the fleet. And I was like, what is this? I don't know what it's about. I've never heard of Abu Dhabi before. I barely knew anything about Dubai. So I thought, well, you know what? Let me give it a try. Their application age is 20, and by the time the application date closes, I would be 20 years old. So I would definitely qualify to work for them. So I did that, and on the 27th of October 2007, I was interviewed. I was invited for an interview in Johannesburg, where I was living at the time, and the 8th of February, I landed into Abu Dhabi 2008. 8th of Feb 2008, I landed into Abu Dhabi for the first time, and there was no Yas Island. There was no nothing really glamorous about Abu Dhabi at the time. It was all new. There were a couple of South Africans in my batch, but I had a good feeling about it, and I just really wanted to make the most of it. Started off my training as cabin crew, and I knew, okay, this is going to be really exciting. And I went with it. I did my training. My first flight was to Paris. And I don't know for those of you who have seen the movie View from the Top with Gwyneth Paltrow, but she says the line in the movie, Paris First Class International. And this is my first guest on my podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Her name is Selena. As we are in my house, she will be making an appearance from time to time. So say hi to everybody, Selena. Say hello. So, hey, not a very happy camper, but in the movie View from the Top with Gwyneth Paltrow, she says this line, Paris First Class International. And I knew when I watched this movie when I was still in school that I wanted to say that line one day. And I actually got to say it as one of my first international flights, which was Paris. And I didn't work in first class. I got to first class. I was stuck in economy class at the back because I was brand new. But I eventually got to say Paris First Class International, and my dream came true. And then, as one does, for those high achievers out there, or those consistent high achievers, when you think you've achieved something, then you're like, right, let's move on to the next thing. What's next? What do I do next? And I knew that I wanted to be a cabin manager in Etihad. And I decided, okay, that's what I'm going to embody, and that's who I'm going to become. And at the age of 23, I became Etihad's youngest cabin senior. So I was in charge of the narrow body, those single aisle aircraft, if you don't know what a narrow body is. And at the age of 25, I became Etihad's youngest cabin manager. And I was in charge of every aircraft that I walked on board. And every single time I got on board the aircraft, the majority of my team that I was leading were older than me. So I had to decide really quickly what was one of the leadership styles that I wanted to portray in order to gain trust from people relatively quickly, and also build culture in the briefings that I needed to throughout the years. At 27, I was awarded Cabin Manager of the Year out of a pool of over 5,000 cabin crew, which was one of the most incredible accolades I reached in my career. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is where I am at. I've reached the top of my career. I'm good. I'm going to start sailing. And then that whole overachiever, high achiever thing starts kicking in again, and you're like, what's next? What's next? And that's when I applied to become a part-time trainer. And not in safety or in service on board the aircraft, I applied to become a leadership trainer. And this particular leadership program that we rolled out at Etihad was phenomenal. It was really extra special because we partnered with a consultancy firm from the UK that specializes in leadership development. And what I learned about leadership development sparked this fire inside that I literally cannot explain to anybody. I already do have a fire on a good day, but this sparked fire inside that I really cannot explain. And when I walked into the front of the room for the first time to facilitate a leadership workshop, which was in 5 phases over the course of 2 years, I was happier than I had ever been, really. I was scared, don't get me wrong. I was really, really scared walking to the front of the room going, what am I going to tell these people? But I knew that I was there for a reason, and every single time I facilitated a leadership workshop, I had people coming up to me going, that was one of the most incredible workshops I have ever been to. Your energy, your knowledge, how people are able to relate to me. And that's when I knew, okay, there's something here. There's definitely something here that I want to explore. And that's what I decided to do. And then with any company at any stage during their growth, and Etihad was going through a massive, massive growth, we went through a restructure. And one of the mandates from this restructure was that all crew that were part-timing on the ground had to go back flying full-time, which I didn't mind. Remember, I said earlier, I love flying. I love commercial aircraft. I love being on board an aircraft. I love aircraft food, which is like, people are going, what? And I'm like, yes, I love everything about being on board an aircraft. And I went back flying full time. And I remember the one flight that I was doing to Dublin. I'll never forget this. It was like a 2:45 a.m. departure. So everybody's sleeping that I know. And here I am going to work at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I managed to get a bit of sleep before the flight, but we were about to operate an almost 9-hour flight throughout the night with no rest. And I remember getting to Dublin. We landed at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And my wake-up call the following morning was at about 6 o'clock in the morning. So if I slept the whole day, I wouldn't have slept that night. So I knew that I could probably get about 2 or 3 hours in now that I've landed, but I had to force myself to get up. And when I woke up, it all just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was almost in pain, without sounding dramatic. I was almost in pain from being tired, and I knew it was time to look for something else. And that's what I started doing. And the moment I made that decision, I won't say opportunities landed in my lap, but through various mechanisms that I put in place in my life at that point, which I'm going to be discussing throughout the season, is that things lined up for me the way that it really did. And I then resigned from Etihad. I was offered an opportunity through interviews. I went through the entire recruitment process, but I was offered an opportunity in hotels as a learning and development manager through networking. And I decided to take up this opportunity. I went for the interview with the senior director of HR, the regional vice president. I did all of the protocols involved in any recruitment process. And I joined Jumeirah Hotel Group as their learning and development manager, or one of their learning and development managers in Madinat, Jumeirah. And boy, oh boy, was I in for something. I was in for a treat. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Here's this leadership trainer walking into a learning and development manager position. Now I'm going to be managing the function of learning. But I applied myself, and I was learning with several WTFs a minute every single day, going, what am I doing? How am I doing this? But with my relationship skills that I'm able to build really, really good relationships with the people around me, I managed. And about a year later, I was promoted to Director of Learning and Development for the Madinat Jumeirah Resort. And then that little thing in 2020 happened. I don't know if anybody remembers that. COVID, really minor inconvenience. This is the way that I tell it all the time. And I was without a job for probably about, I would say, 10 months. And then after that, I rejoined Jumeirah at one of their different hotel properties, or one of their different hotels. And then I finally finished off my career in the hotel industry in the Rotana Hotel Group, where I became the senior director or corporate director of learning and development and talent management. So I was heading up the function of learning and development at the age of 34 of over 10,000 people, and across almost 70 business units in their corporate office in Abu Dhabi. And let me tell you, I learned so much from that role. But the biggest thing that I learned wasn't how to manage learning and development. It was that this isn't actually what I want to be doing. This isn't me being in an office and not interacting with people as much as I really do need to interact with people. And again, leaning into my network, I realized that maybe somebody in my network can help me try and find what it is that I'm meant to be doing with my life. Not necessarily with my life, but if I could do something more aligned with what I love doing. And that's when I reached out to my now CEO, Hazel Jackson, and we started conversations. And for the last, it's 8 months or 9 months now, going on 9 months, I've been working in a role that I didn't know was my dream job up until I actually started in it as a senior consultant, focusing predominantly on things around leadership, podcasting, growth, and the people I get to work with, the clients I get to facilitate for. I don't even know where to start to go, this is where I'm meant to be. And going back to my ADHD diagnosis, I realized that I am in exactly the right place and exactly where I'm meant to be. Because one of the first questions my company asked me when I told them about my ADHD diagnosis was, what can we do to make the environment better for you? And that's when I knew I am exactly where I'm meant to be. And because I don't want to say lucky, and that's actually something, hey, Selena, and that's actually something that I'll touch on a little bit later again as well, is I don't believe I'm lucky. I think I've put in an incredible amount of effort and hard work. She's clawing on the carpet, which is why I'm looking down. But it's very, 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 it's down to just really knowing what it is that you want. How I got there, I'm definitely going to share across the season, but it's given me the space to come back to the creative drawing board of my podcast and the Leading with Andrew show and go, right, I have to give back to the world. And this is my opportunity of giving back to the world. I worked in 2 major industries, in aviation and hospitality. And in the last 9 months, I've touched 11 different industries with the clients that I've worked with. And the lessons I'm going to share, the opportunities for learning about yourself, I'm going to share. Everything that I've used, I'm going to share. Everything that I've struggled with, I'm going to share, because maybe it's going to help you, maybe it's going to help somebody you know. So as I say in the intro, whether you have ADHD, whether you think you are neurodivergent, or whether you work with somebody who's neurodivergent, I've got you covered. So that is a little bit about my story and where I am at. And the first episode, I decided, other than just doing a little bit of a reintroduction for myself, I want to introduce you or show you something that happened to me this week, actually. So the timing of this podcast or this first episode is absolutely perfect. And that is, I got published in an online talent development publication called Spark Magazine from the Leonardo Institute. I'm just showing it to both cameras over there. And it's an online publication, but I did print a few of the copies, and we're going to get into exactly what that article looks like in a second. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please make sure that you pop us a 5-star rating or tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to share, because you never know who you're helping. Let's get back to the episode. Before I dive into the article, I thought what would be really, really cool is if we actually just cover a little bit of a basis of exactly what ADHD is and what that could show up in leadership, because that's exactly what my article is about. So, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, is a disorder that is neurodevelopmental and characterized by executive dysfunction, occasioning symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and emotional dysregulation that are excessive and can be pervasive, impairing in multiple contexts and developmentally inappropriate. ADHD shows up for people very, very differently. It shows up differently in men, it shows up differently in women, and I am still learning so much about it. But I find that it's incredibly important, and it has played an integral role in some of my successes in my career, but it's also played a role because of mismanagement and going undiagnosed in some of my epic failures in my career, which is what I'm going to be sharing throughout the season as well, because I think it's important that we obviously learn from mistakes, but also focus on what we've done well. And another thing that I wanted to share about ADHD is it's people with ADHD tend to have lower levels of dopamine in the brain. So it's a complex condition, and it involves the dysregulation of dopamine and another chemical called norepinephrine. Sorry, I have to pronounce that correctly. And a lot of stimulant medications that treat ADHD can prevent reuptake of dopamine, increasing brain levels of the chemical in order for us to focus and things like that. And why did I decide to bring ADHD into the podcast or into the season is because I definitely struggled with it as I left flying. Flying was really great for me. Flying was really great for me because we could go from, we've got somebody who's now, she's parking off on my article. Anyway, flying was really great for me. The reason why flying was great for me was because I went to work, I did a flight, I left the flight, did the paperwork that was required from the flight, although painful sometimes, did the paperwork that was required from the flight, and I was done. I could move on. I wasn't going to work with that same group of people again. Every time I went to work, it was a new group of people, and that just, it worked so well in somebody that was undiagnosed with ADHD. And when I stepped into a routine, regular sort of job, when I stepped into the hotel industry, I didn't really realize it at the time. I think at a hotel level, a lot of the time with HR and learning and development individuals, and basically any employee of a hotel, because there are so many business units in the hotel infrastructure that you can move to different hotels and you can have a different experience quite frequently, that kept it at bay, but not as much as it was when I was flying. And it wasn't until I was in my corporate role when all of these symptoms were really polarized for me. I was struggling to pay attention. I looked at other people that were able to pick up concepts really, really quickly, and I would get really frustrated at myself. And one of the key symptoms of ADHD is low self-esteem and a heightened sensitivity to rejection. So we are a lot more attuned to rejection sensitivity because as an ADHD person, what we tend to do is mask. So we want to come across as a neurotypical, but that then exerts a lot of energy, and we tend to then fall back on other areas in our lives. So me, somebody with a lot of energy, somebody that loves being around people as much as he loves being alone, I really struggled in my corporate role of trying to sit still, inattention, hyperactivity, wanting to connect with people and things like that. And that's when I knew that I needed to make this change. And because I've made this change and I'm in a role now that is very similar to flying, but in the sense that I go in and I do work for a client and then I leave. We still do follow-ups and things like that, and we work with some fantastic clients on a regular basis, but the projects are all different. So it gives me that hit of dopamine, that novelty, anything that is novelty, that is of interest to somebody with ADHD gives you that spike of dopamine. And I also want to preface this episode with how you manage your ADHD as a leader, as an individual contributor, is entirely up to you because of your environment. There's so many factors that are involved in managing ADHD or any form of neurodivergent disorder. I have worked very closely with two psychiatrists that I have got my diagnosis from, and we've taken a real broad evaluation of my life and what my day-to-day looks like in order for me to manage it effectively. So to give you an idea, because I love what I do, particularly around facilitation, I don't need to be on ADHD medication on a daily basis. So when I'm conducting training, I am hyper-focused. I'm in that classroom. I'm sitting there. I'm not sitting there. I'm very much standing and working a room, but I am making sure that the people that have given me their time walk away learning something really motivational, learning something inspirational, and transforming their leadership styles, or taking what they've learned to transform their leadership styles. So that hit of, or that constant flow and regulation of dopamine, I really don't need medication when I am facilitating. When I am in an office-based environment and I need to be designing really, really complex training programs, anything that requires me to be sitting in front of a computer for extended periods of time, one of my doctors said to me that we can look at ADHD medication as a performance enhancer, which I thought, oh, okay, I thought you had to be on ADHD medication on a daily basis. And he said, no, not at all. ADHD medication is fast uptake, and once it wears off completely. So I thought, okay, so let's give it a go. Haven't given it a go just yet because this was very recent, the diagnosis and also the follow-up on medication. But I am going to be giving it a try very, very soon, and I will definitely be reporting back on exactly how that is. But you can stay tuned to my Instagram channel, where I'll definitely be doing some stories around what I feel before I take this medication and what I feel after I've taken this medication and if it works, because there's various ADHD medications out there and everybody on TikTok, on Instagram is saying something entirely different about how they have handled the ADHD medication. Some people say they lose their spark. Some people say it quietens the noise. Some people become really, really aggressive on ADHD medication. So it's a mixed bag out there, but I'm excited to see what works for me. The one other thing that I want to preface as I go into this season of bringing ADHD into leadership and just raising awareness around it is that it's not a trend. ADHD is not a trend in the slightest. I see a lot of TikTokers going, oh, that's my superpower and things like that. While ADHD and ADHD leaders are incredibly creative, they are the change agents. If you aren't managing your ADHD effectively, it can severely impact your life, which is what I encourage every single person to do. Is you've got to find the patterns in your everyday life. You've got to identify them, and you've got to go, how is ADHD, knowing what the symptoms are, knowing what your diagnosis is, and working closely with your doctor. How has this impacted my life? What does my life look like on a daily basis? Only then are you able to turn ADHD into your superpower, or let it take over your life completely if you're mismanaging it. So there is a lot that we are going to be covering in this season when it comes to ADHD. And I'm so excited that I work with people that know about it. I work in a company that is supportive of it. And I know that I'm using it as my superpower because it's made me so incredibly creative. I've shown so much compassion for myself since my diagnosis. And when I walked into the doctor's office, I said to the first psychiatrist that I went to about getting a diagnosis, I said to him, I'm not here for medication. I'm really just here for my mental health because I want to know, is the way that I think normal? And to very quickly find out it's not. I think very differently, and my brain is wired very differently to that of a neurotypical. And you know what? I couldn't feel more like a unicorn, if I can say that, like an absolute unicorn, because it has become a superpower because I'm managing it effectively. So that is a little bit about ADHD. I'm educating myself on it a lot more so that I'm able to share an opinion that is educated, but also to have conversations with maybe some of my guests are neurotypical, maybe some of them are neurodiverse, and bringing that collective intelligence together is what's going to make it really exciting. So back to the article. The name of my article is Planned Behavior, Redefining Leadership for a Neurodiverse World. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to mention with the article around leadership and what are some of the barriers to leadership and what makes a leader really transformative. So as you can see over there, when you go onto the publication, these papers have crinkled slightly because my cat is sitting on the article that I am trying to take you through. But as you'll see on page 37, I'm going to be posting all the links for the podcast. You'll find them on my Instagram, Leading with Andrew, and you'll also find them in the show notes of the episode here on Spotify or YouTube, wherever you're choosing to watch or listen, or Apple Podcasts as well. And some of the things that I mention in my article, particularly around leadership as a whole, it actually started when I was designing a values workshop for very, very senior leaders for a client that we were working for. And I really went into, I won't say the depths of industrial psychology, by no means did I go into the depths, but I started scratching on the surface and I stumbled upon this theory called the theory of planned behavior, which fascinated me so much. And very basically, or at a high level, the theory of planned behavior kind of says, hey, your brain's actually making multiple decisions that you are unaware of before you actually have an intention to behave in a certain way. And Again, at a high level, those are three things that are happening. It's my beliefs towards the behavior and my evaluation of the outcome, my subjective norms. So what are people doing around me, my peers, my colleagues, my friends? And then what is my evaluation of my capability of performing this task? And I included that in some of the training for these very senior leaders that have probably been through values workshops before. So I wanted to make it really interesting that, hey, before you even have this intention to act or behave in a certain way, your brain, very much like it controls your breathing and your digestion, is making these decisions that you're unaware of. But should you become aware of them, you're able to mitigate them a lot better. So that's why it's called Planned Behavior, Redefining Leadership for a Neurodiverse World. And one of the first things that I address in this article is the fear of failure. Now, a lot of leaders set themselves up for success, and I've seen it. I work as a coach as well in my current scope, and I currently coach 5 general managers for one of our clients. And I see that fear of failure is a driving force for a lot of people. But what tends to happen with that is leaders become micromanagers, because not only are they scared of failing themselves, but they are scared that their teams are going to fail, and therefore they become these micromanagers. They don't let people shine. They don't invite creativity in, right? I was there. Fear of failure or fear of staying in one place for too long definitely drives me, but awareness is key. And if you're aware that your fear of failure is either driving disconnection with the people around you, or your fear of failure is a healthy dose of stress that keeps you going in order to succeed, is very, very, very important, almost vital in your success. So from the fear of failure, I go into the peer networks. I would not have gotten to where I am today if it wasn't for my peer networks. And I have made incredible relationships with people. Most of them have become guests on my previous season. Some of them are returning guests. And every week I am meeting new people that I connect with on LinkedIn, that I connect with on Instagram, and I am learning so much from these people. But when it comes to building networks, and this is something I say to people that are either starting in industry or starting in their role from wherever they are, network, network, network. Apply the same to networking that you do outside of work to when you're inside of work. And that was probably one of the superpowers that I got from being a flight attendant, was every single time I went to work, I was working with people I had never worked with before. And a briefing in an airline, or particularly at Etihad at the time, this has changed, I left in 2018, is 12 minutes. So I have 12 minutes to set up a team culture of people that I have never met before. I've got 12 minutes to set up trust in a team that has never worked together before. And I've got 12 minutes to assess whether or not I'm working with 100% competent individuals or people that are just sort of there for the money, sort of assess what the performance, or try and predict what the performance of my team is going to be. That gave me the opportunity, or the how-to of going, right, when I step into a new team for the first time, or when I step into the front of the room for the first time at a new client, I know how to conduct myself in order to build effective relationships really quickly. And if you deposit into the relationship bank of the people that you build relationships with, and you say you're going to do, or you do what you say you're going to do, that is crucial in your success as a leader. Now, another part that I touch on is ADHD and leadership. We can be creative. We can evolve really quickly. We are the change agents, okay? We can be very successful as leaders. But if you are somebody with ADHD and a leader, or you think you have ADHD, or you work with a leader that has ADHD, and you aren't looking for ways to effectively manage it, you can break down connection with people. You can break down relationships with people because of impulsive behaviors. You can break down relationships with people because of, you might be so hyper-focused on something that you get so lost in the details of things that it drives your team members away. your impulsive behavior can... I've still got a cat. We can either choose to cut this or we can choose to keep it in the episode. I probably am going to keep it in the episode because it's honestly, it's real, it's me, it's so imperfect. And I was looking at my show notes, and Jay Ruse, who's sitting behind the camera, is taking pictures. But we'll have to include this into the editing post-production. But yes, ADHD and leadership can be a fantastic thing. And I quite honestly think this is a very uneducated guess over here, but I can tell that a lot of successful leaders in the world out there for some massive corporations are on the spectrum in some way or another, from OCD, ADHD, all sorts of different, if you want to say disorder or superpowers. Again, depends on how you manage it. But you've got to focus on making sure that you are building effective relationships, because those people are going to be the people that are going to help you when you hit your shortfalls. And that's one thing that I've learned in my career is as a leader, I have surrounded myself with people that enjoy doing some of the things that I don't enjoy doing, but we complement each other. It's not just one way. I enjoy doing some of the things that they don't enjoy doing. And together we have this harmonious relationship. And in some shape or form throughout my entire career, I'm still very close with some of the people that have helped me launch my career, that have helped me and supported me, that have cheered me along the way, because I've also returned that. And then, if I can just get to my article, thank you so much, Selena. I've explained what the theory of planned behavior is. So I've gone into how I approach my preparation for a client, how I have gone into preparation for a meeting, how I prepare to post on Instagram, for example, is all planned now, because it's all about my attitude. It's all about how I'm assessing other people are doing. And remember, healthy comparison is great. Jordan Peterson, the professor of clinical psychology, his book is 12 Rules for Life. Not everybody agrees with everything he says, neither do I, but he does make a lot of sense in so many different ways. He said on his podcast once that when you compare yourself, it's fine. But the mistake that we make when we compare ourselves to people is we compare ourselves to people that are doing the best in that field that we are comparing them to. So if I'm comparing myself to another podcaster, the podcaster that I'm going to look at is a podcaster like Joe Rogan, who is the most listened to podcast in the world, or the number one podcast on Spotify. That's not going to get me anywhere. It's going to demotivate me. I need to compare myself to other podcasters that are focusing on leadership or ADHD in my region. That is the key for motivation when it comes to how I plan my behavior. And then finally, taking the first step towards transformative leadership. And I really encourage you to go read this article. There are some incredible authors that the Leonardo Institute has pulled together for the September 2024 issue. And I'm just a drop in the ocean of some incredible data that is out in this online publication. But if I had to give somebody a piece of advice when it comes to leadership, leadership is not so much about being a leader. It's not so much being about a manager. It's about being a conductor. And being a conductor, if you think about it, is someone who is able to bring the best out in people. Look at an orchestra. And that is the example that I use all of the time. Look at the Berlin Orchestra, the Philharmonic Orchestra. A conductor is standing there with his back to the audience, focusing on the people in front of him, and he's able to bring those sounds and merge those sounds back and forth and come in and faster tempo and slower tempo. That is transformative leadership for me, because let me tell you something. All of the leaders that I work with now are leading, not all of them, but most of them are leading across 5 generations. And remember, people do not live to work anymore as much as older generations like baby boomers, Gen X, and older millennials do. People work to live. Your younger millennials, your Gen Zs, and your Gen Alphas that are going to be coming up into the mix really soon. So to wrap that up, or to clean it up really nicely for you, is be a conductor. Know what you have around you. And if you're listening to this podcast because you are neurodivergent, plan your behavior and build your relationships. That brings me to the end of the first episode of season 2 of the Leading with Andrew show, talking about ADHD. That is a drop in the ocean of everything that we are going to be covering throughout the season. What you can look forward to if you skip through the beginning of the episode, I encourage you to go back. What you can look forward to is some dear friends coming onto the podcast, a professor, diversity, equity, and inclusion, my friend who is a clinical psychologist and used to work with patients back in the UK. I've got motivational speakers. I've got holistic healers. I've got all sorts of people that are coming onto the season. And I'm so excited to get them into the lounge and onto the couch and ask them questions about how they have crafted their success. Some of them might be neurodiverse. You never know. It depends on what they want to share. But I'm so excited for you to come along this journey with me in season 2 of the Leading with Andrew show. And I look forward to the next episode. And that is another episode done and dusted. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching or listening, and whatever you're doing, watching and listening. It was great to have you here. Please make sure that you let me know how you found the episode by either giving me 5 stars or commenting so that we can make sure that we are giving you what it is that you want to listen to and watch. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Leading with Andrew or Andrew Walliser. See you soon.